welcome to CTRMRadio, a podcast hosted by Commodity Technology Advisory. My name is Irina Reitgruber, and today I will be talking with experts from VAKT about operational intelligence platforms powered by AI Agentic technology. Many thanks to Charles Wapple, Director of Growth, and Michael Barr, Director of Client Services and Interim Head of Products, for these discussions. Please do like and share this podcast. Many thanks. Thank you again for taking part in this podcast. I will start with some small introduction. Basically, AI use for automation is very popular at the moment. There are some point-wise solutions automating certain workflow within certain solutions. But on the other hand, recently, ComTech Advisory and ClearOps has written a white paper about so-called OTRM, which is Operation Trade Risk Management. And what is that? That's a platform which automates the operations from deal life cycle of complex deals, logistic workflows, back office workflows. But not only that, it's also a kind of front end for the user to talk with all background system during this operation. So you have a lot of background system which also communicate with this interaction layer. And in this way, it also solves a kind of interoperability problem, which is really a problem in many companies. So we call it OTRM. And what do you think? Is that the place where we see a new software category being born, or it's just some new, flow of innovation, which will then end up with something else? And how do you position VAKT software in this context?
Yeah, of course. So it's quite interesting, right? So obviously the problem space of the operational layer when you're talking about sort of post-trade management isn't new. There's obviously been a number of vendors, sort of middlewares, integration players that have been working in that space, connecting systems, moving data and automating workflows to a certain extent for quite a long time now. I think what has changed is the technology that's available in driving that now, right? So obviously when we talk about sort of agentic AI and what that makes possible, it's obviously pretty endless, but I think initially, obviously, two things that come to mind is the speed at which you can move and also kind of the scope that can be tackled sort of quickly as well, right? So, what we've been building, obviously almost for a decade now, is what we refer to as sort of an intelligent data fabric. So, that three-layer definition in the question there, so the sort of AI-powered front end, the integration layer, and then the intelligence platform, that maps almost exactly to how we think about ourselves. So, we pull that together into sort of a single coherent view across the post-trade lifecycle. So we do sit across all three. The front end is where we're covering that full operational lifecycle. The integration layer, which we actually find is always the piece that gets underestimated the most, right? So when we think about sort of AI and what it can do in particular, but a number of different sort of technologies. Any tool can go and take structured data and unstructured data and put it into structured data. But what is that actually structured into? Like, how does that land back into a customer's ETRM or a similar sort of system that they're using internally? Especially given that in the commodities market, there's a high number of sort of in-house built and off-the-shelf ETRM and internal systems that customers are using. So at VAKT, our data model is domain specific. So we feel that solves a lot of the sort of issues from an integration standpoint up front. And quite interestingly, obviously in the white paper that was written, I think it was quoted that over 40% of commodity firms say that integration is their number one concern when it comes to sort of being able to implement and gain value from AI. So, luckily for us in our space and sort of the journey we've been on, we have that domain specific data model, and we have structured AIs that are in play and being sort of consumed and utilized by multiple customers, sort of with our standardized queues in that space as well. And then obviously that last piece, the intelligence layer. So we kind of look at our AI as two-tier. So there's sort of the data extraction and the structured output of that, which has been productionized now for us for many years, reading sort of unstructured communication flows such as recaps, nominations, etc., and comparing that again, structuring that into our data model, making that available for the customer both on our user interface but back into their ETRM or internal nomination systems, perhaps. And then secondly, that second tier is the newer technology of sort of a multi-agent layer, introducing a bit of a smarter workflow. So it's empowering the user to take quicker actions, sort of in the loop versus on the loop control for them. So again, like that front end, the integration and the intelligence platform, that's what we see as ourselves, and that's what we see as being an intelligent data fabric.
Thank you. So it seems to be that you also see yourself as a part of this kind of software, this software category. But what are your main differentiations, and where do you see particular strengths of VAKT within this category? Charles, this time is a question to you.
Thank you, Irina. Yeah, so I would say VAKT's primary differentiator is our focus on delivering outcomes and not purely software. And that distinction matters enormously in this space. We focus on working in partnership with our customers, leaning on our industry pedigree and the years we've spent evolving our platform in line with the requirements from oil majors and traders that we call our customers today. We don't promote a prescriptive solution, but we take our customers on an evolving path to automation that's accelerated with the millions of pounds and the years invested into the VAKT system already. What we find is that one size doesn't really fit all in the industry, and all companies, when you get to know them, are very unique and have their own way of doing things. And so having the battle-tested technology underpinning the flexible UI gives us a product that can map onto any workflow. And secondly, as Mike said, the idea of using middleware to automate areas of post-trade workflow is not new. And VAKT is unique in our ability to automate the complete end-to-end workflow and get that data back into our customer systems out the box in occasion. And with AI rapidly facilitating a lot more automation, that shouldn't distract from the fact that we've been doing this for almost a decade, and we've dedicated our company mission to develop a hardened enterprise-grade product with an exhaustive master data structure that fuels the automation and the logic that we have. So data is our most valuable commodity, and we continuously manage and enrich our data, working with our existing customers, inspectors, and terminals to ensure that we can capture all the data points required for our platform to work seamlessly and deliver those expected outcomes I mentioned. And to finish off, I just mentioned our delivery track record. So industry data shows that 66% of IT projects run over budget and 49% run past scheduled dates. VAKT is in production today, and our record against complex enterprise requirements directly counters that pattern. And clients tend to choose us in part because they've gone a certain way down an alternative path and realize they might need some additional support. And so we protect our clients against unchecked local innovation, shadow IT, IP leakage, compliance exposure when using AI tools without governance. So we've integrated AI at the right points of our workflow with the full auditability to enable VAKT's ultimate vision of delivering double the trades at half the cost. And so if I kind of summarize that, we partner with our customers to deliver outcome-based solutions. We've spent nearly a decade and millions of dollars in perfecting our platform and data, and we deliver the latest tech solutions successfully and with full governance.
Thank you, Charles. So you are saying that you have been working with your customers for many years, they trust your solution. And now my question is, now you are coming to them with absolutely new technology, with AI technology. From their point of view, what is the reaction? Are they excited? Are they trustful? Or they have some concerns, some reservations? How do you talk to them about this kind of solution? This is particular about your solution, and generally, I would be interested to understand how do you see the headwinds and tailwinds for this OTRM type of solution in the market? Are there more reservations? Are there more excitement? How that will progress, please?
So generally, I think excited is a good way, but cautiously so. So whenever I've spoken to customers and prospects about what VAKT's goals are, they align with their mandates. Revenue needs to go up, margin needs to improve. And this is not a new world that we live in. The whole trading industry has continuously been chasing these goals, looking to new markets, moving operations to lower cost locations, but that arbitrage has been heavily exploited. So now the buck falls to technology for further improvements. So VAKT's intelligent data fabric increases operational capacity in cases up to 70%. And so I always ask the question, what would that additional capacity mean for your business? Some are skeptical about the numbers, but everybody does agree in principle that any additional capacity would be a huge enabler to their business goals when it comes to the physical operations of their trading. And again, we've been having these discussions with the oil industry for years, and the latest technical developments are no different to the ones that have come before. Decision makers have seen vendor or technology hype. They're rightfully cautious about claims that AI can automate everything. And our role as a SaaS vendor and a digital partner is to guide our clients through that caution by demonstrating practical, embedded outcomes rather than theoretical capabilities. And so we lead with proof, not promises.
Okay, thank you. And my last question would be to Mike. It would be interesting to understand how do you estimate the future of AI agentic technology in commodity industry in general, where we are at the moment. You know, there is this technology adoption curve where you have excitement in the beginning, then it goes slow down to disappointment, disillusionment, then it has certain equilibrium and comes in the productivity plateau. So if you look at AI agentic technology and OTRM, how would you estimate the position of this technology on technology adoption curve, please?
Yeah, it's a very interesting space, right? Because I'd say, you know, when you're looking at AI and the technology there, and even agentic in particular, it's not necessarily just one curve. There's kind of several running at the same time, and that's mainly due to the sort of speed that the technology is moving at, right? So, you know, when we're looking at agentic, obviously the LLMs and the orchestration layer that brings have rapidly developed, and kind of we touched on that in the first question about sort of how that enables now, you know, understanding not just extracting of the data, but understanding the sort of the situational workflow that's sort of behind that data being exchanged, and then being able to, that enables that smart workflow automation, right? So, you know, I'd say when that sort of come along, there was a peak of inflated expectations, which obviously generally happens with new sort of buzz technology. I think a lot of vendors sort of all of a sudden became AI powered and introduced that tagline, and that language was kind of a little bit ahead of the reality. As I mentioned, I think sort of in the AI space in particular, the cycles move very fast. Sort of when you're talking about Gartner hype cycles, you're typically looking at sort of 5-10 years for sort of technology adoptions and sort of rollouts. But, you know, the AI sort of side of it, typically we might be looking more sort of 12 to 18 months. So sort of reading on the Gartner website, right, in 2025, they mentioned that sort of Gen AI is already in the trough of disappointment. So I think it was, again, across industries, under 30% of CEOs were satisfied, while there was an average spend of sort of almost $2 million. So, but at the same time, AI agents were simultaneously at a peak, right? So it's kind of that two stages, two curves that are happening at once. But I think generally speaking, when you look at this technology and kind of the nature of agentic AI, the stable infrastructure underneath is going to matter more than ever, right? So while the model sort of layers churn, you need something solid underneath it. So again, we mentioned earlier that sort of 43% in the white paper, 43% of sort of commodity participants mentioned that integration was their number one concern around the introduction of AI and being able to utilize it. And across the industries, Gartner sort of referenced that almost 60% of companies don't feel like their data is AI ready. So, you know, we feel like VAKT solves that problem with obviously that domain specific data model we've already referred to in a few points that Charlie's made. And I think if we look at intelligent data fabric in like the space that we're referring to here, right, I'd say we're almost a little bit behind that sort of, we're not in the trough yet when it looks at utilizing this technology as part of an intelligent data fabric. You know, I think the hard problems and the lessons learned are becoming visible. So you've got sort of the data quality, the integration depth, governance, and obviously one big sort of overriding theme that's ongoing in this space is sort of build versus buy, right? So, you know, I think a lot of companies initially sort of go to a build stance on this sort of things, and then they slowly learn sort of what that actually costs, not just sort of the development of the initial tech, but obviously sustaining it, the SLAs of keeping things running as expected, accountability when or if something goes wrong, and then obviously keeping pace of that sort of build and implementation as the models are evolving as well, right? And we've mentioned a few times, technology in this particular area is moving at a crazy pace. So by the time something's actually been built and implemented, often you're actually behind the next curve because, you know, that curve has come, as we mentioned, maybe 12 months. So it's kind of, that's a very interesting thing around buy versus build. And I think a lot of people, as I say, who went the build route, certainly on workflows that are sort of heavily data driven, are now realizing that sort of the cost and the maintenance of maintaining that and having it at a sort of up to date with the technology pace, right? So I think it's quite interesting. VAKT itself, this isn't the first time we've gone through one of these cycles. VAKT was built on blockchain technology. The whole arc sort of played out there, right? There was a serious hype around that, followed by, I'd say probably disappointment across sort of industries, and particularly in the commodity space. And then obviously that led to sort of grounded adoption, where genuine use cases were identified and held up, and people could see the value from those. So it probably didn't match up quite to the initial hype, but going through that disappointment allows you to sort of manage the specific workflows or use case where there is value. And I imagine a similar thing will happen here, right, in the AI space. But as I say, it's just going to happen much quicker. When we think of VAKT, we think we kind of sit on the slope of enlightenment, we'd say. So, and that's not to say we're sort of ahead of anything, right? But we have our AI in production, so it's not sort of pilots. We're augmenting platforms that already work with our customers rather than standing something new completely separate to those. So again, going back to those points we've discussed around integration, etc. And I would say the sort of plateau of productivity for an intelligent data fabric in this space is probably a couple of years away, right? But I think importantly, the only way that vendors have got to get to that stage is if they've solved that infrastructure and that integration layer that we've already discussed quite a lot. So, where we are ourselves on the journey, we're looking at sort of implementing this agentic AI in a safe, serviceable way with a compliant adoption managed by the users, right? So that's kind of where we're operating ourselves.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting. So if you see yourself already in the slope and alignment, that's quite an achievement, I would say. That very much depends on company and use case, but it's very exciting to hear this. As you know, ComTech Advisor is going to issue the second edition of our AI study, which is coming out very soon. And I can only agree with your statement that the speed of the changes is really crazy. And we have done this work 1 year ago, where AI was just maybe coming to the hype of the expectations. And now we see so soon, just after 1 year, how large the progress is. That's really great. And again, thank you very much for this interesting conversation. And yeah, let's talk again sometime later to see how quickly the things are changing again. Thank you again for watching this video. Please like and share this podcast. That will help us. Thank you again. Goodbye.